So we number one. We almost number one at being last.
Almost. Hey, if you're not first, you're last. That wasn't even planned.
They're off in the Kentucky Derby.
Interest of the greater good for me to smoke a joint and calm down.
I am the greatest. He'll fall an eight to prove that I'm great. And if he keeps talking jive, I'm going to cut it to 5.
Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Ville Chillin' Podcast. Today, we're talking about a little something different than we normally do, and only because it's made quite a buzz in like the Louisville subreddits, and it's barely been touched on in the news, but we just thought it was something worth talking about, right?
Yeah, I guess it started like on Reddit like a week ago. Like it was a rumor kind of thing that people were talking about, and then the news kind of confirmed it just a day or two ago.
Yep. And we are talking about the Thorntons on Broadway and First Street closing. And it's interesting because it's one of the busiest Thorntons in Louisville, right? So
Used to go on field trips there when I was a kid.
and it's doubly interesting because something that we learned looking into it is Thorntons is actually headquartered here.
I didn't know that.
I didn't know that.
Like we've talked about businesses
told me.
before, but
Yeah.
it's kind of surprising. I mean, the Thorntons are everywhere here, so
Yeah, you see them all over the place. But then, looking into it more, they've been around since 1971 and were founded right across the bridge in Clarksville, Indiana. So it makes sense that we see them all over the place now. But I definitely never knew they were headquartered here. And so it makes it even more interesting, I guess, when such a major location, a popular location, a heavily trafficked location is closing when their headquarters is here. It's like closing a KFC.
right.
You know what I
Or
mean?
Indies.
It goes against your first thoughts and first intuitions.
Well, and then like I was kind of surprised at first when I saw it on the Reddit. I really didn't understand what the big deal was because there is so many Thorntons. Like I think they had one, I forgot where it was, but they had one right across from the other, and they were both profiting because of how convenient it was. They did some math to say it was worth opening it. It wasn't even like they were competing against each other because they realized that on that other side of the lane, like they were losing business. The Thorntons was losing business overall to the other gas station, like Speedway or whatever. So,
And it's just based on people being able to turn in right versus turn in left, and then turn out right, more importantly, and keep going where they need to go, right? Instead of having to try to make a left turn out of a gas station, which, depending on where the location is, where it's at, and the time of day,
you might wait till tomorrow.
yeah, it might take a long
you can.
time. So,
Well, and that's why it's such a big deal, I guess, is because of the location.
yeah, I mean, to your point, like at first glance, like what's the big deal? We look at the map here, and we see that they're within a few blocks. Of course, it's downtown Louisville, so a few blocks is a lot, and it's a lot of one ways, which is part of the reason it's a big deal. But there are shells. There's several Shell stations, like 3 Shell stations, a couple Valeros. There's a Marathon. There's other gas stations, but it's about the commute for people. Like how far out of their way do they have to go? And a lot of people hit 65 right here off of Broadway.
In that 5 or 10 minutes, it might not mean as much, like on average, just when you don't have anything else to do. But whenever you're on your way to or from work, that means everything.
Well, and in rush hour gridlock downtown, those 5 or 10 minutes can be more like 15 or 20.
Right in the price, like they are the most competitive ones there. Thorntons is the lowest prices around that area, so you're going to be spending more time and money having to get to the other ones.
Yeah. So it definitely makes sense in a lot of ways that it is a big deal that, like we said, it hit Reddit, and like I said, it was kind of a rumor. It was like a day or two ago, and it was like, is this true? And then the news picked it up, and there's been more on the subreddit since then. So, and some of us are fortunate enough to not have to make that commute downtown. But when you consider downtown traffic and everything, it makes sense.
Yeah, definitely with all the one ways and, like I said, just the traffic in general.
Yeah. And then, not just like it makes sense that it's a big deal, but going back to, Thorntons is headquartered here. Like, why would they close such a high traffic store, such a prominent store?
Mm-hmm.
But then you mentioned, yes, it's the highest traffic, but the lowest profit.
Right. So, and that goes into, I guess, kind of like the area. There is, a lot of theft. So, even though they are bringing in the most volume as far as sales overall in the area, every Thornton's in the area, most traffic, most volume, because of everything from like litigations, because of incidents that happened in the past. There was a security guard who there was an altercation, and one of the people there, I don't know if he was a customer or what, but he got shot, and the family ended up suing the security company that Thorntons had hired the security guard, and then Thorntons themselves. So that was about 1.5 years ago. So I'm sure with that, and then between that and then the theft, yeah, they're just struggling to make any kind of profit.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously, any business has to close when there's profit loss. You can't sustain loss of profit. And if you can't make the rent out of, profit, then you gotta reevaluate. But it's definitely going to impact the community right there, and the whole downtown commute for the daily commuters.
Well, and one thing that kind of separates that Thorntons, or just that gas station in general from other ones is right behind it. You'll see there's a hotel, and there's a couple floors that are kind of sponsored out by charity. Pretty much, they help house people that are homeless, and they sponsor a couple floors there so that they're good, especially like with the way that the weather is and stuff. Like, people can't be out in these extreme codes or once it gets like extremely heat. So it's amazing that they offer these up to them.
Yeah, I mean, it's awesome, but there's a many homeless shelters in Louisville, but a lot of them are full, and it is awesome that we have charities, we have people stepping up in the community to make sure they have somewhere to not freeze in these extreme temperatures, but at the same time, they need resources for food and everything else, and so it definitely leads to some of it, and it's more than just a corporate profit loss problem. It's somewhat of a socioeconomic problem.
100%. And those behaviors, that those behaviors don't just go away overnight. It takes a lot. So,
well, and neither does debt and trying to get on your feet and everything.
Mm-hmm.
None of it goes away overnight, and so it is a high crime location. I think we saw that at one point there was like four
emergency calls a day at one point.
Yeah, and that's wild.
And it's not like it's just the Thorntons. It's not like people are like, hey, let's go do crime at Thorntons or whatever. It's just that location just kind of draws it in, and it could be one of those things where a call happens and it's not at the gas station, but it could be at that Thorntons, but it could be across the street from it or whatever, and that's the closest marker. When you're in Louisville, you don't. When you ride around or whatever, a lot of times you just use other markers as to say where you're at, right?
Yeah, like the McDonald's, the White Castle.
I'm at the McDonald's on Broadway. You know where you're at.
Yeah, and so it's definitely high traffic and low profit, and then like you said with the lawsuits and everything, that just takes away from it even more. But then we also saw back before the lawsuits even came up, Thorntons was acquired by BP. So they're just a subsidiary.
We're sorry.
So it's just a subsidiary of BP. And so who's making the decisions? Is it really Thorntons headquarters or is it BP headquarters? BP's known to have to deal with and pay out for some lawsuits themselves. So we're sorry. But going back to the whole socioeconomic issue, I guess, and specifically how it was talked about on the Louisville subreddit. I think now is a good time to bring this up. Somebody commented and said, why is this news? Who cares? And somebody commented and said, when even a gas station with nonstop business closes, it's a sign that the sheer concentration of social services and lack of basic law enforcement makes running a business in that area impossible. There's a limit to the level of dystopian BS before the tourism and the rest of the functional downtown economy dies. Then the total purchasing power shifts even faster eastward. The tax-based funding those social services shrinks, and Louisville reverts back to the economic death spiral experience between 1950 to 1990.
Man.
And I think, you're the one who found that. And so what was your first thought when you read that,
Well, once it really paints a picture, right? Like when I noticed, of course, that they were saying like the location, right, is important. The location, the fact that it's the cheapest gas around, or the best one, competitively. But then the fact that it's the busiest one, and I think he kind of paints a picture in that. It just doesn't, it's not a good thing.
Yeah,
it's really not a good thing. And I do think it's ironic because also at the same time, it kind of when that person's referring to tourism, it's ironic because that's one thing that actually has just changed. Tourism here in Louisville is at an all-time high.
Yeah,
when just local, people being the locals being downtown isn't.
Yeah, but we know that we can tie that into, there have been studies done on COVID effect on downtown cities, right?
Bless you.
So, so there's a direct correlation, and a lot of cities have bounced back 100%, and they did it by studying cell phone traffic, right? Pre-COVID, post-COVID. And Louisville is at like the bottom of the list of major cities, like number 50 or something, 49 out of 50 or something. We've only recovered about 50% of our, local traffic.
So we almost number one at being last.
Almost. Hey, if you're not first, you're last. That wasn't even planned. But yeah, man, it's this quote, when you brought it up and you said it really, that's exactly where my mind went. We're still trying to recover from that COVID era, and like as a city, we're struggling downtown a little bit for the locals.
Mm-hmm.
But it's funny that the tourism aspect is up. You look at articles as recent as 2024, this year, February 1st, Louisville tourism celebrates record-breaking year. And the Derby City was recently named one of the top places to travel in 2024. So that's that's very interesting to me. And of course, the Derby and everything probably has something to do with it. But the city was also named the number one summer travel destination in 2023 on Airbnb. So we obviously have a lot to offer, but those locations like that Thorntons are still, they're prime locations for tourists, just like they are locals. So it sucks to see it go. And when we're talking socioeconomic issues, it sucks to see that play such a role in a business closing. Things like they said, basic law enforcement and social programs having impact or lack thereof. But it's interesting that while some of these businesses are closing, the overall city and the level of tourism is still record breaking.
And you would hope that almost like it would connect in that with that tourism, that extra revenue that comes into the city, that could go towards more resources for the community, so that a situation like this doesn't happen again.
Yeah, absolutely. I saw an article recently too that had mentioned that tourism was on the rise, and that a lot of local businesses are saying that they're seeing more tourists than they are locals. And when we saw that, I think, going back to COVID, how it all relates, a lot of places ended up, going work from home during that era. And then once they found out they didn't have to pay rent anymore, it didn't make sense to send their employees down. It made more sense to keep the utilities off until you can get out of your leases and everything. And we're seeing that now with Humana leaving. Was it Fifth Third, I think, is leaving, and LG&E's even moving headquarters, I think. So there's a huge shift in the whole downtown economy and landscape right now.
And at the same time, though, you still have other businesses, recognizing the tourism, recognizing that there's still growth there. So you have even restaurants, right? Like, so you got Spinelli's reopening. So that's going to be awesome. It's going to bring in, more music acts, of course. Like they're definitely doing their music thing. So that's awesome. And there's others that are also like following suit. So it is definitely a weird balance between like, local businesses, trying to survive downtown, and then and then them being supportive between both the local the local community and then tourists as well.
Yeah. This is just kind of this Thorntons closing and everything is just kind of the first real, I guess, real impact to the area that could shift things in some way. But it's going to be interesting to see how city decides to maneuver this whole thing, and what's going to happen to the location. I know we saw somebody joked, and what'd they say?
They said they were going to turn it into another one of the parking lots.
Parking lot, yeah, of course. Oh man, that's something which I guess comes with tourism too. Is a lot of lots just
profitable.
Yeah, it's free profit. All you have to do is have space and charge for parking, and people pay. If they want to go, they pay. So
now, one thing that what's come to mind really, I know this is kind of random, but the yes and. Right, so like with what our buddy Stefan talked about the other day or whatever, with his improv, yes and everything. So what could be a yes and to this situation is, with people having to reroute, have a totally different commute. Yes, it may take more time. It might cost more money, but maybe that could open maybe see another part of the city that they haven't seen before. Be closer to other restaurants that they might not would have tried.
Yeah,
or just businesses in general.
It might see a new banner for a hometown hero. You never know. Yeah, man. You never know what's going to come out of this. Obviously I'm not personally impacted by the closure, so it's different for me to talk about it than somebody who is, but I'm excited to see what's going to happen. Cities just change over time. It happens. I grew up in Okolona, right next to Southern High School, and I can't tell you how much that little strip of Preston Highway has changed over the years. Speaking of Thorntons, they built that one right next to Meyer after I lived there, and that whole lot was empty for 10 years or more. A lot longer than that. I was there for 10 years as like a kid before they built anything there. So
old heads will be like, dude, I remember when this was all farmland, and it was like just 20 years ago or something.
My dad used to talk about when Preston was just a gravel road, so and now it's a 4-lane highway with a center lane. So the cityscape's changing. The whole tourism aspect is changing. It's going to mean changes for the locals. It's going to mean changes for the commutes. But hopefully, and all we can really do is hope that the city maneuvers it properly.
As long as they don't turn it into another Dollar General. I think there's one right across the street, and they can't compete against themselves like a gas station, man.
It might be a little early, but it could turn into a Halloween store. You know what I'm saying? You never know.
I might be down for that, dude. Like that's.
Oh gosh, if there's anything you can count on, it's Halloween stores and Dollar General or Dollar Tree. But yeah, like I said, after we saw it on Reddit, we thought it was an important thing to talk about, bring some attention to, and just found it interesting. So it like we said, it's definitely going to transform the cityscape a little bit, and it's going to impact a lot of people, but hopefully that's not too large of an impact in a negative manner. And hopefully, you know,
R.I.P. Thorntons West Broadway.
yes, sir. So I guess with that, got anything else to add?
Nope. We might have maybe we'll do another episode on like a little bit of the history and like follow up on like the downtown and landscape and see about where it's going a little bit more.
Yeah, where it's come from in the last several years, I think will be an interesting follow-up, because it's taken a long time to get to where it's at already. You know what I mean? And certain places closing opens the way for new businesses to come in. And with Louisville real estate being what it is, I mean, that's half the reason people want to come here, is the real estate. So it'll be interesting to see how it unfolds. While I am, again, blessed that it's not impacting me, I do hope that the people that it does impact, it's not too harshly. You know what I mean? So either way, again, with that happening, tourism is on the rise. So like you said, it'll be interesting to take a look back and then take a glimpse into the future and see what comes up.
Yeah. Hey, I mean, that also means, when tourists do come here, they don't have a gas station that's close, on that location where they have to go further out, so same thing with locals, like
they got to see more. They might see a
they
restaurant. They might see something. Yep. You got that right. So, all right. I guess with that, we'll go ahead and close out this episode, and we will see you all next time.
Yep.
They're off in the Kentucky Derby.
Interest of the greater good for me to smoke a joint and calm down.
I am the greatest. He'll fall an ace to prove that I'm great. And if he keeps talking jive, I'm going to cut it to 5.